here to join us for what I am convinced will be a great panel. We're going to be talking about the post-manufacturing economy and how that impacts Latin America. I'm Shasta Darlington. I'm a journalist, and I've been covering this region for more than 20 years now, from Cuba to Mexico to Argentina. I came to Brazil in 2011, actually returned to Brazil because I'd been here before, to open CNN's bureau, and I am now a contributor for the New York Times. And I have to say, covering this region for over two decades has been a lot like riding a roller coaster. I think probably most of us in this room are hoping that we're going up for a while now. I think we have a great panel here with people uniquely positioned to talk about what we're going to be discussing today. This is going to be, as I mentioned, the manufacturing-led economy. And I think, for me, what struck me when this was first brought to my attention is just so often the way I hear about it is how automation is affecting high-income countries, how robots are taking the place of humans, and how the middle class is being squeezed. And it's not as often that we talk about how automation is affecting emerging market economies, places where in the past companies have gone to outsource their production to take advantage of cheaper labor. And what we're seeing is that they're doing that less and less. There's less of an incentive for obviously these companies to go elsewhere if automation is taking over. We have seen some high-profile cases of this. In the past, a lot was made of Philips closing down some factories in China to take production back to the Netherlands. And all of a sudden, they were closer to their market, and it made a lot more sense. But what I would argue, and I'd love to hear from you, that in Latin America, perhaps with the exception of Mexico, we may not be talking about factories closing so much as the pathway, what has been the traditional pathway to development and success, is being closed off. It's being diverted. And I think that would be something that would be great to hear from you about. I know this is the end of the day, everyone's a little bit tired, but maybe I could even just talking to the people here in the room, how many of you in your countries have been seeing or discussing automation as sort of this, the impact that it could have is reducing the outsourcing of production to your countries? Has this been a topic of discussion? Anybody? Okay, that doesn't surprise me. How about the use of technology to provide new sources of development? Is that something that you're talking about in your countries? Well, good. I mean, that's one thing that I would challenge everyone here to talk about today, is looking forward, how can this become a new pathway? If traditional manufacturing-led economies are no longer the option, where are we going forward? So I'd like to introduce the panelists, starting with Jennifer Artley. She is the president of the Americas for BT. I will be getting to her to talk a bit about the skills gap, the gender gap, how technology can be used by companies. Then we have next over the Minister from Colombia of Finance and Public Credit, Mauricio Cardenas, will be discussing the challenges that governments face, what they can be doing to overcome these obstacles. And I'm hoping to also draw him in to discuss a little bit of the current topics of the day, protectionism, trade war, and how this plays into our conversation. We also have Monica Flores, the president of Latin America for ManpowerGroup. She and our next panelist have just done an interesting survey on the skills gap, so we'll be talking about that. Angel Melguizo, from the chief economist at the OECD's Latin America unit. We'll also be getting both of you, I hope, to address some of the structural challenges and obstacles. So if I could actually get you to start off, Angel, talking about this survey from Manpower.
Yeah, let me start by thanking our audience here, who are not with us and not with the second best player in the history of football, who is in the next door. It's clear that post-manufacturing and skills gap is really attractive, and we appreciate it. Let me start by stressing that manufacturing and development don't have a linear relation along the time. No? What we have seen in countries is that manufacturing tends to increase at the beginning, jobs, value added. And then from a certain per capita income, what you see is some other activities taking the lead. This is the story, this is the history, so this is why we shouldn't be so worried about thinking about post-manufacturing area. This is economic history as we have seen in Asia or Europe. In Latin America, it's happening earlier than in other regions. This is the point. So we are seeing manufacturing not really taking the lead or even declining before the region reaches high income status. So what should we do? What should we do about it? Should we push for manufacturing or should we do something else? And this is what we are proposing, to do something else. If we see the experiences in Asia or in Europe, how they became high income economies, how did evade the middle income trap? It was not exporting manufacturing. That's priority number 15. It was really building institutions, rule of law and visionary states, investing in human capital and infrastructure, and securing the financial tools in order to finance these policies. Among all of them, among all the experiences that we have seen in Spain, in Portugal, in Malaysia, in South Korea, in Ireland, in Israel, one policy stands out, which is skills. And this is why we think we have to focus so much on skills. Here, I'm generally optimistic. Here in skills, I think we should be really worried about the state in Latin America. 2 out of 3 firms in Latin America say we have a project, we have vacancies, but we don't find the workers with the skills that are needed. This is a project that we are leading between Manpower Latin America and the OECD Development Center, asking the private sector, what are you needing? And more importantly, which are the skills that you are going to be needing in the future. This skills gap is huge. It's happening all over the sectors, in manufacturing, in extractives, but also in services, which is the one that we expect to take the lead. And these skills are not generally in the textbooks, because they are skills like emotional intelligence, critical thinking, how to organize your time. These are the skills that firms quote as more lacking, 2 or 3 times more frequently than just managing PC or knowing finance. So among all the policies in this post-manufacturing area, we think we have to focus on skills, but we are on time.
Thank you. If I could get, Monica, if you could follow up on that. I just wanted to highlight some figures I read about on the World Economic Forum site. I'm doing a little plug here. Today, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, over and over again, according to this recent survey by Accenture, companies say #1 priority is skills, but then when they ask companies, okay, so what are you investing in that, in training? According to this survey, 40% said none, 0. 57% said they're investing some in training, and just 3% said they're investing significantly in training. So what's going on? What can this be? What can happen from a company perspective?
Employers are facing a war for talent, and the scarcity of talent is costing us money. Because if we have a vacancy and we can't fill it soon, and then we don't find the right people, and then the talent that we have doesn't implement the business strategy that we have in a changing world, we are losing market share, we are losing money, we are losing our positioning. So the skills that we need in the future of work, and in the future of work, and now, are not developed in a 6-month training course, because it's related to soft skills, how the individual behaves, how he faces life, how he communicates with others, how he understands the world. It's not, I will teach you to drive a bus or something like that. People is in the need of develop themselves. Companies are needing to invest in upskill and reskill their own talent, preparing them for the new business model that we will have in the next 5 years. Because businesses are changing. Businesses are not quite they were 10 years ago when we were successful. We need to change our business model with our talent, and that's the main challenge. We need to be thinking in how will I do my business in the next 5 years? How will I do my business in the next 10 years? How I prepare my team do that business in 10 years.
One of the things we were talking about before the panel started was how the gender gap plays into this. And I was hoping, Jennifer, you could talk a bit about maybe we aren't using some of the resources we have at hand the way we should, whether it's women or technology. How can companies, without doing too much training, be taking better advantage of what's at hand?
Well, it's interesting. I agree with everything you're saying about soft skills, creativity, empathy, collaboration. That's critical. But what's interesting is we need to make sure that our workplace, tomorrow's workplace or today's workplace, isn't displaced by technology. So as we are automating and investing in tools, processes, machine learning, et cetera, it's important that we are also bringing the workforce with us. We, BT, with Accenture, did a study in the UK last year, and it basically showed the gender gap. Of course, you know, there's definitely 46% of young men are receiving more encouragement than young women to even pursue their interest in technology. So in order to understand one's interest in technologies, one of the interesting takeaways from the study was we need to make it clear how technology plays a role in the things that kids love, and make sure that the people who influence them also understand it. So they're thinking about it as a native digital person from early days. With that, computational thinking, in addition to the softer skills, has to be a part of the curriculum, not just in schools to prepare them for a digital world, but also for teachers and training for teachers. And that's a big investment that we're fortunate to be able to make in the UK, partnering with many schools, but it's difficult to conquer that one worldwide. I think the other things are similar to what you were saying. You have to bring your existing workforce with you. And so as we're looking at all of those dynamics, and we're looking at kids today and the gender gap, what's interesting in companies with established STEM programs, so science, technology, engineering, math, where they've had success, countries are actually moving to what's now being dubbed a streamed program, which is science, technology, robotics, engineering, art, math, and design. And so that, by expanding STEM to streamed, it sort of creates new doorways for more people to walk through because they can identify how they think and how they might be able to contribute to the conversation. I think that's a big opportunity to help close the gender gap. And
it seems that it ties right in with what you're saying. I mean, the streamed seems to combine a bit of the soft skills with the technological skills. Were you going to say one again?
Yeah, we are facing a paradox. Companies are in problems finding the right talent, but almost none are looking for women. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you ask them, what are you doing to find the right talent? They're looking in other industry, they are looking in other countries, they are investing in training, but none of them have a special strategy to attract women to study these kind of careers or develop these competencies. And women are facing threats because we are overrepresented in those activities or sectors that will become automated. And we are underrepresented in those activities that are valued in a new world of work. And we are not having leadership positions to do the change in our companies. So if we want companies that innovate, that invent themselves, we need diversity inside our organization. And we are not having that. So women should study different things. We don't need many psychologists or teachers or these kind of feminist careers, and we need to push them to study technicians, skills, and to develop these kind of soft skills that we need in the market.
Minister, I want to sort of put you on the spot a little bit, which I'm sure I will do repeatedly here. But one of the things that Angel had mentioned is that while in other regions, not Latin America, the institutions were built up, the rule of law. That's, to a certain degree, the government's role, and it clearly hasn't happened enough in Latin America. What do you think governments should be doing while the training is going on in the workplace? What should the governments be doing to prepare the next generation to make sure that Latin America is ready for this post-manufacturing economy?
Well, we need jobs. The number one problem that many Latin Americans answer when they are asked in different surveys and polls is jobs. The economic security is associated with a job. It's not so much about getting a transfer from the government or a subsidy. It's really having a job that generates income. That's what gives security, economic security to the household. So the post-manufacturing economy has to be an economy that generates jobs. So yes, we need to increase technology, capital, mechanization if you want, but that should come with jobs as well. Also because many of the countries in the region have very high unemployment rates, so it's still a major challenge for us. So where to start? Skills. So getting a basic education, high school education, is certainly not enough. Yes, we need to improve the quality of education. We need to make sure that education at the primary and high school level is broader, that we have better teachers. But really, one of the main difficulties for employers in the region is access to people with university or technical degrees. And if you look at the region and you compare it with other regions of the world, really this is one of the most dramatic weaknesses that we have. Very low enrollment rates in university or technical education. Let me give you the case of Colombia, my country. 8 years ago, in 2010, the enrollment rate in university education was only 37%. So 37 out of 100 high school graduates were able to go to university. Now it's 52%. It's a fantastic increase. But we're still well below what needs to really be done in terms of increasing the skills of the workforce, technical or university education. That's one element. So that means more resources. And that means also more credit so that students can actually enroll and pay for their tuition and pay for their living expenses. That's a crucial element here. The other element that I'll just highlight has to do with taxes. We, in this part of the world, built our tax systems around activities that were easy to tax. For example, tariffs on imports. So it was easy to get the goods in the ports, in the customs, pay the tariffs. That was a very important source of revenues. 50 years ago, the conventional wisdom is that one tax base that was easy was the payroll of the companies. So many countries in Latin America have very high payroll taxes, all with very good intentions. They're earmarked for labor training, for providing housing subsidies, many, many good intentions, but at the end of the day, it's high taxes on the payroll. And those have devastating effects because employers do not have the incentive to hire people formally. They want to avoid those taxes. So that's why there's so much informality. And informality breeds not enough training. The informal workers do not get training. They don't have access to credit. So we need to cut payroll taxes. And we need to move to other forms of taxation, like indirect taxes, like the VAT, or corporate taxes, or personal income taxes, but not payroll taxes, which are generalized. It's a pervasive characteristic of the tax system in our region, high payroll taxes, and that, of course, affects the ability of generating well-paid, formal jobs. So I think these are two areas, better taxation and also more investment in education, the whole ladder, but especially including now the higher education, university and technical education.
You mentioned taxes on imports, so this is something I actually wanted to get to. I mean, it doesn't seem directly involved, but I think another aspect to what we're talking about now is something that we're seeing coming up, which is rising protectionism. We saw in the United States last week President Trump announcing tariffs on steel and aluminum, and basically in Latin America, the countries that seem to have sort of played by the rules and followed that path, the manufacturing economy developed their steel industries or their aluminum industries are now being punished. So how does that play into this conversation? And I'd love to hear from you, Minister, and from anybody else who wants to jump in. How else can you...
Well, I just add a quick note, because this topic you just mentioned, it's been a generalized element in the conversations we've had today in different panels and different formats. So this region, to a large extent, with some exceptions, but to a large extent, follow the conventional wisdom in terms of economic strategies, economic policies, open economies, open not just to trade, but to foreign investment, low fiscal deficits, low inflation. So we've played by the book. And to a large extent, very successfully. I mean, the economies have grown faster. A lot of people have left poverty. But now there are challenges. And the challenges are associated with these measures you just mentioned about protectionism. And it's not just that, not just steel and aluminum, but there are other challenges. Reversal in some of the trade agreements that the region has. So what to do? These, to be used in a proactive way, should be a message that we've postponed for too long a real deep integration within Latin America in terms of trade, in terms of finance. So this is generating a context where it's making more urgent that we remove barriers and we integrate our markets because we're going to have more challenges from abroad.
If you could follow up, yeah.
Absolutely, and I would add to Minister Cardenas, foster mobility of people and of workers, and improve the portability of some of these technical diplomas that are being invested in some countries to be recognized in the others. This is something that the region is lacking, really, is lagging behind. No? We have the good or bad luck. We had the luck to have a partner at the north that decided to go its way. No? Well, now is the time then to integrate more. That means finance, trade, investment, but also needs the movement of ideas and the movement of people. And that's why I think we will propose the Pacific Alliance, something very practical, is recognize the titles that different technical institutes in each of the countries are really giving. Let them meet and agree a certain minimum of standards and let people flow, because we are a region in which regional migration is really limited, and this is dampening also the opportunities for better jobs for the young people in our Latin America.
If I could add on to that an example. So we are a British company. We operate in 180 countries. We support customers who need technology solutions around the globe in many countries. And one of the great things we've done in the past year and a half probably is serving specifically some of our US headquartered companies, our customers. We're leveraging technical and engineering skills that we have in this region to support those customers. And the quality of work is higher than what we could get on the market because there's a scarcity of skills. And we're really pleasing our customers with the quality as a result. So we've created hubs, engineering hubs, finance hubs in Argentina, in Brazil, and in Colombia, so that we can maximize the value of the talent where the talent is accessible. One example, lots to do beyond that.
I was talking to an economist at the World Bank in preparation for this, and he was saying, because in the past, many of Latin America's economies have been so closed and so protectionist, there are actually a lot of efficiency gains to be made. So he said if you compare a car factory in Brazil or Argentina with one in Canada they can produce 3 times as many cars at the same time and the same. So in some ways, it seems that there's actually just starting with what you have on the ground, there's so much to be done and so much to be gained, even within the manufacturing economy. Would you agree with that?
Yes, well, I think we're late. We are late in the regional integration. We are late in moving forward in all these analyses and discussions that we are having for years. And I want to point out that we have an advantage now and is the demographic bonus. But it will remain for the next 10 years, and that's it. We need to move faster in order to prepare them and to accept the talent mobility in a legal way, in a way that the region can exploit that advantage that anybody else has except Africa. And we are late, and it's like, let's move forward. A lot of discussions, a lot of thoughts, a lot of studies and analysis, but I think we're lacking of action.
Another question I had, I don't know, Jennifer, if you can answer this, or Angel maybe. I was struck, in Latin America, the use of technology by individuals is extremely high, right? It's one of the biggest, either Latin America as a region or Brazil or other countries in here, you'll have, Uber's second biggest market, Facebook's second biggest market, et cetera, and yet, company-wide, it seems that the use of technology is so low. Why is that?
Well, it's an incredible investment, and it's very interesting to see how the consumer experience, especially in an emerging market, can leapfrog technologies. Mm-hmm. And I think Brazil is a great example of where we've been able to leapfrog technologies time and time again. In a corporation, you invest in your systems and your processes and your tools, and you get very married to them. And then you add on things and you bolt on new things, and slowly over time it morphs into something that maybe isn't actually what it was intended to do, but that's the system platform that you're leveraging. And to change it or upgrade it is an extreme investment. So I think that companies are constantly weighing the cost-benefit analysis of automation, the decreased labor costs, increased productivity, those are the benefits. The cost of actually doing so is big. And in some cases, the cost is even social, where a manufacturer or a corporation is a large employer in a small community. There are social ramifications as well. But I think that moving away from the legacy is the hard part. And so as you look at the cloud and the opportunity that the cloud offers us, it equalizes us to some degree. And what we're hearing CIOs say, hands down, consistently, is they just want to buy off the shelf because they want to move fast, because innovation is happening within technology so quickly that they want to be able to plug and play to some degree and add on the next thing, but in a way that is standard, repeatable, and they know it will work and can be deployed quickly. So we're a ways away from being actually able to say that we do that regularly, as industries. But I think that's the direction that companies are going.
Do you think that more on an industry-wide basis there is the opportunity to leapfrog it rather than just individuals?
Selectively. I mean, if you look at oil and gas is quite advanced in how they're using IoT technology, Internet of Things. And I think Brazil actually, in October of 2017, just launched an IoT national plan focused on smart cities, manufacturing, agribusiness, and healthcare. And the premise of the plan certainly is to drive efficiencies in operating systems, but also to increase the production of value-added goods and services. And if you can underpin that with an innovative business model and increased efficiencies in your processes and systems across your entire supply chain, then you're really changing the conversation.
Minister, putting you back in the hot seat, it seems like in many cases, at least over the last couple of years, there has been a serious lack of investor confidence, and a lot of that is related to corruption. How can that be addressed? Is it being addressed? And how big of an impact does that have on what we're talking about, preparing these economies for development, if people are afraid of them to a certain degree?
Well, it does have a huge impact, and I think it's the number one problem today in the region. And I just broadly characterize it as rule of law. I think we've come a long way, as I said before, on the economic issues, on learning how to do things in the right way, adopting the right policies, social policies as well, a lot of evidence-based policies. There were countless number of workshops on how to do better social policies, more effective. That meant a massive amount of Latin Americans left poverty in the last decade. So I think those are big achievements. But now it's emerging, the issue of rule of law, as one of the weak spots in the region. And this has to do with corruption, but it also has to do with homicides. We have the largest number of homicides of any other region in the world. So that should be now the focus. Now, how to do that, how to improve the rule of law, which I think connects with this conversation that provides confidence, credibility, attracts more investment. That's the #1 topic in the agenda. How to do that? Well, I can tell you on my side, on my part, but this is a task for everyone, business, social entrepreneurs, civil society, but in my job as finance minister, is transparency, information, making sure that information arrives rapidly, that people have access to it. So for example, publish every single contract that the government signs for the procurement of government goods and services. So that's one aspect, but it's not enough. There are many other things that need to be done, but I think putting the focus on rule of law is the right thing to do, because it's what really will help us progress faster in many, many areas of life.
Could you follow up then?
Absolutely. In our view, there are many reasons to celebrate where Latin America is today. No? I mean, recognize the progress in many macroeconomic policies in the past, the advances, the innovation in social policies that, for instance, can teach some of the policies that OECD countries do. The city of New York learned about conditional transfers from Brazil and from Mexico. So there are lessons to be taught to the other regions. But we have like 3 goals in our narrative for Latin America. Overcome the middle income trap. Aspire to become a high income economy. It can be done. Secondly, consolidate the middle class. The huge fall in poverty in Latin America created a majority that is today a consolidated middle class, but also a big amount of citizens that are vulnerable. They range in the middle. They don't have a formal job, so they are vulnerable to fall back into poverty. Consolidate that segment. And finally, rethink institutions. Our institutions have to be rethought. Being more trusted. Today, only 1 out of 5 citizens in Latin America trust the government or think that the elections are fair. To be transparent and open, and here is more than just show what the state is doing. It's open the decisions to the citizens, because we see social entrepreneurship outside on the street compensated by the fact that many social services are not working properly. Capabilities, enough taxes, you have to have fiscal muscle to finance your policies, and human capital in the public sector, and not just at the top, we have very good ministers, but also at the middle levels, better human capital at the middle levels in our states. And finally, linking to the beginning of the discourse, forward-looking visionary states. Citizens today in Latin America are not just fine not being poor. They can compare their lives with the lives of citizens outside. They see the jobs that the others have, the opportunities. So this is where the state has to really be leading all the skills agenda and the productive development agenda. If it's not manufacturing, then what? Somebody has to think and implement, and this is what we think the rethinking of institutions is about.
That reminds me of a statistic I saw today that the estimate is that 65% of children in primary school will end up doing jobs that don't exist today. How do you prepare for that? You guys are the experts. How do you prepare for that?
Just soft skills. Soft skills. Teach them how to think, to solve problems, to learn every day their whole life, and teach them to be real citizens.
Mm-hmm. Collaborators, teaching them to collaborate. That's not always role models, but in the future economy, we need people who can collaborate.
If I might, is teach tasks and not jobs. Who knows? I mean, what's the job of an economist? It's a mix of reading newspapers, speak some languages, relate to each other. What's going to be the job of tomorrow? I don't know. But some of these tasks are going to be there. So the skills agenda has to be a skills agenda on tasks and not jobs. and on activities and not sectors, because some of the sectors of the future are not existing today either.
I'd just add, connecting with the previous topic in question you raised, it's also about soft skills, but also values, because that's the only way in which you can really have a society that strengthens the rule of law, knowing what's right and differentiating that from what's wrong. I think that's very important as part of that education.
It just seems that another obstacle for Latin America, to a certain degree, is its reliance on commodities. There really was a great ride here for a while on the commodities boom for a decade or more. But then when you talk about integrating these economies, well, I sell iron ore. Oh, so do I. I mean, how do you build up the value chains? How do you create something more forward-looking in a region, not all of it, but that is so largely reliant on commodities? Anybody?
Well, I'll say a word about that. As everything in life has the good and the bad side. So on the good side, the increase in commodity prices in the region really helped everyone move forward, and especially people that were left behind. Poverty rates decline. So to a large extent, this last decade was a successful decade in terms of economic advancement and social. Now we come at the end of that cycle. Commodity prices have fallen. It's been a real challenge for us in the region, and I'm really happy to see that after the declining commodity prices, we have been able to keep social progress. There has been no reversal, and that's not a minor achievement. The reduction in poverty still continues. This is the case, for example, in Colombia, despite the fact that we have now a situation which is quite different from the last decade. Now, what comes next? I think an important element to really help us move forward, diversify our economies, enter the post-manufacturing era is infrastructure. If there's also a generalized characteristic in the region, is very weak infrastructure. So part of the use of the commodities boom was to help build a better infrastructure, and there are many examples in Ecuador, for example, in Peru, here in Brazil, but it's not enough. We still need to do a lot more. Building infrastructure is really a major challenge today and a top priority. Governments do not have the resources to do it now. It's mostly the private sector. That means good regulation. That means public-private partnerships. And I think that's the name of the game today in infrastructure.
I mean, hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure, and this is why all the business services around telecommunications and how to make things move faster are so crucial. Latin America is a region in which its exports depend much more on doing it fast and that in OECD countries. So we have been seeing that the barriers of the lack of real good logistic services is as important as the hard infrastructure. So this is a sector that has to be developed. And I mean, don't rely on the richness of having commodities. No, if I had played well football, maybe I wouldn't have studied economics. No, but I didn't play that well, so I'm here. No. But I mean, it's important to rely on what you have. And Latin America is a region in which half of the countries are commodity exporters, which can be a trigger to develop services around them. Chile is doing that around the mining sector. Uruguay is doing that around the food sector. You can add value and develop some services around what you have. And this is, I would say, part of the answer of a post-manufacturing era in the region.
Monica, I was wondering if one aspect of the sort of integration of Latin America that I find fascinating, because the economies have been so closed, et cetera, there hasn't been a whole lot of integration. But what we are seeing is more labor. People can move around, right? And except with the exception of Brazil, people speak a lot of the same language. I mean, do you think this should be utilized more? Could it be utilized more? Do you think just moving people around?
It's moving people. I think that the paradox is that businesses are global, but governments are very local. And we are not helping talent to move and to learn and to share knowledge. And then all our countries have a lot of restrictions to have foreign workers. Visas, certifications, and you need to revalidate your studies, and then you just can work for 6 months and then go back home. And that is not making it easy to do business and to learn and innovate. We need to have a kind of talent integration also, not just finance integration or political integration or economical integration. Talent integration to do this faster. The other thing that I want to add, it's not related to your question, but I need to say this.
Okay, great.
Sometimes when we think about skills, we think in young people. They need to acquire these new skills. And it is not so true. Everybody needs to acquire these skills because people from my generation, we were used to another world. If you speak English and you know your business, you are okay and you will be successful. We need to be leaders in a digital era, and we don't know how to do that. Skills need to be developed by women, old people, young people, and leaders. We did a survey, another survey with millennials, and the main issue with millennials is that they do not respect institutions and companies because they are not leaders, because they don't understand how the world is moving to another era. So that's my point. We need to think skills, but starting with ourselves. And it is not a problem that the government is going to solve, or society in general, or companies. We need to act in consequence, everybody, or we are not going to do anything, and we will be, for the next 5 years, discussing the same thing in the same forum.
I'd like to ask you to just follow up on that a little bit, but also say that afterwards I would like to open up, and if there are any questions here from the audience, people, if you'd like to address to the group or to someone specific, please think about that. But I was wondering if you could follow up a bit on that.
Yeah, and one thing that strikes me as you're speaking, Monica, is we are in a multi-generational workforce right now like we've never seen before. People are waiting to retire beyond when they've historically retired. Some people are coming in younger, and in some cases they're up to 4 or 5 generations in the same workplace. So as a company or as an organization, we need to be fluid in understanding how to change and how to not just have organ rejection for millennials, but incorporate the best of how they operate into what has been tried and true, and let go of things out the back door at the same time. And that's the part that's really hard, but it's also the human part. And it's the fluidity of the change that we all need to bring to bear.
Are there any questions, or should I move on to my next one? Do you have anything to ask about this? Please go ahead.
Hi, Herman Betten from Royal DSM in the Netherlands. I just wanted to build on, or ask a question, building on the discussion you just had with regards to education. One thing that strikes me odd, even as a parent, is that when we are young, we are being sent to school, compulsory, whether we like it or not. My son is not a big fan. But when we're early 20s, then we go off to the workplace and then we say, good luck, you now know everything you need to know for the rest of your life. Oh, by the way, please work until you're 70-something if you're lucky. Now, you already talked about changing skills. To what extent would you support the idea of, let's say, when you're later in your life, like 45, maybe 50, to do a compulsory re-education to see whether you can reapply skill, relearn skills or something like that? Because right now, the point you made, if you're around 60, in the Netherlands where I'm from, you need to work until you're 70, no one's hiring you because you're 60, you according to the employers, you don't have the skills. So would you support an idea like that, and then would it then be the responsibility of the public sector or of the private sector, or maybe because it's the World Economic Forum, both?
Well, of course, I think that we need to reskill ourselves, especially you are my age, I suppose. You're younger than me. Well, no, well, we need to reskill ourselves or we will be out. Part of the reason of companies not hiring elder people is not just because they are 60 or 55. It's because they don't know how to give results in a different world. We need to be more flexible. We need to build intergenerational teams so we can learn from the young people and they can learn from us and then do a great team that innovate. But for sure, we need to reskill, and it's our responsibility. I'm talking to this public, not to people living in poverty. I'm talking about you, people, business people. It's your responsibility. Governments are not going to do much. They are thinking in different things. Companies don't have enough budget to invest in training everybody. I think we need to take the responsibility of reinventing ourselves to be attractive in the next years in the world of work, because we will be healthy, full of energy, and we will need to work also.
I would add, just in the US, there's an emerging trend for reentry programs, which is an interesting concept. So often women in particular go off on maternity leave and decide to stay home, and they, whether it's 2 years or 10 years, at some point they're wanting to re-enter the workforce, and life will have moved on in the workforce, right? And so they're lacking skills. So it's interesting to see companies tackling what you described with a smaller sector than what you're describing, I think, but at least beginning to think about the need to integrate people from one lane into another and have them be relevant.
We can have another question over here.
Hi, thank you. My name is Lourdes. I'm a global shaper from El Salvador. And my question is actually, Minister, you dabbled in it a little bit, but you mentioned that, in order to start solving this or to better the job generation situation, incorporating it with technology, you needed the collaboration of obviously multiple sectors, civil society, public sector, private sector, and obviously citizenship. Latin America suffers from different disparities in violence and insecurity, the wide skills gap you're all talking about, slow job generation, and obviously in education, that you mentioned education as well, but it's obviously an education that should be aligned to private sector needs as well. But in that sense, with all of these different challenges going on in Latin America, where do you start, and where do you start collaborating with these different sectors, and how do you do it? Because if that's the answer, I also want to know, why hasn't it started yet?
It's doable, and others have done it, and there are some good examples. I think we should start by saying there has to be a more open conversation, even just across Latin America, on experiences, on best practices, on cities, states, governments that have done it right and have done essentially what I think is the right package, or the package that leads to better results. It's a package where you really have the ability to combine forces, the government, the private sector, the civil society. So there are some cases, for example, in cities, take the case of Monterrey in Mexico or Medellin in Colombia, collaboration between the private sector and the public sector to improve the educational system, not just the universities, but also basic and high school education. So it's a joint effort. What it really takes is awareness. Awareness that we have an issue. I think the first way to start solving a problem is by acknowledging it, and if we create the right space, we will be able to improve. This is impossible just in the hands of the private sector or in the public sector or the universities or the schools. It has to be a joint effort. But we just have to put the right focus. What is the recipe? And why it hasn't been generalized yet? Why we're still debating? I think the recipe is you need permanent dialogue between the private sector and the educational sector on what the needs are, on what, so that you don't have that skill mismatch. You also need to have a lot of government funding. This is not just possible with the private sector. Government funding for technological training. Make sure that the private sector is incorporated in the decisions. It participates in the discussion about what type of programs are needed. And there are good examples of things that have improved and that we can follow to make sure that in the future, we continue to move forward.
Question? Here we go, over here.
Good afternoon. I'm Eduardo Maneira from Global Shapers, Florianópolis Hub, Brazil. Well, the manufacturing nowadays is just based on benchmarkings. So you'll have lean, like you get the best practice of Toyota and another Japanese philosophy companies, and just implement. In this turning point where we don't have a lot of benchmarkings, it's this some opportunity to start in front of the other competitors, or how do you say the scenario of no benchmark is no one to follow and time to be protagonist and make the future?
No, I mean, you're a global shaper, so it's up to you to shape the future. We are already old school. I mean, I work for the OECD, and we try to build benchmarks of everything, no? But if our analysis shows something, is that there's no unique path in development. I mean, we started talking about the experiences in Asia or in Europe becoming high-income economies with a certain degree of manufacturing, with institutions, with finance, but really each one had its own model. It is the same by sectors, no? And now is the time to create new activities and not sectors, because actually sectors is old-fashioned again. It's just to categorize things. I think it's important that I mean, from the public sector and the international organizations, we build enough information for people to decide. And that allows me to go back to the first question. It's not to make compulsory skills training again or reskilling. It's to make sure that people know what would be the gain if they had the skills that they are not having right now. Or is to give the citizens, the young people, all the information about the vacancies in different sectors, different jobs, in different regions. What is the role from the public institutions? And this is our role, but it's obviously from the civil society to come out with different ideas and not copy. Because I mean, Latin America is a very innovative region, and it should stay the same.
I want to just throw out another question before I open it back up over here. We've been talking a lot about what needs to be done, what should Latin America do to prepare for this post-manufacturing economic future. From your perspective, is it being done? How far are we coming along? Have the foundations been put down? What are we looking at?
Can I say something about that? I don't think there's going to be before and an after. I don't think there's a divide. I don't think that what we have done in the past is wrong, and we'll start doing the right things now. For example, I don't think we're going to change the economic structure entirely. I think one aspect that we have, which is a big advantage, and we cannot ignore it, is that we have natural resources. And that shouldn't be a problem.
Right.
We shouldn't be worried about that. On the contrary, the world will continue to need natural resources, but we just have to make sure we extract them in more sustainable ways, with better practices, that we add more value to them, that we preserve what needs to be preserved, but it's a big asset. The world needs energy, the world needs food, the world needs minerals. So we will continue to produce them, but I think we have to do it in a better way. And a better way means a way in which we can improve our living standards, we can do it in a sustainable way, but we also generate the jobs and the revenues and the income that people need. So my view is it's going to be an upgrading, but not necessarily a complete. We're not going to change the structure in which these economies operate.
Diversifying and upgrading is the agenda, the productive agenda of Latin America. It hasn't been the same for many years, but it's valid today. One specific example, the relation between Latin America and China. China is one of the main importers of commodities from the region. Well, because of the change in the structure in the country, the rebalance is towards more services, less industry, more consumption, less investment. There were some commodities in which they started to import less. But there are many others in which they are starting to import more, because this new China is a China with new urban middle-class consumers who like quality. Unfortunately enough, Latin America is very rich in very high-quality food commodities that are going to be demanded by the Chinese. So it's time to invest and to upgrade these sectors that are going to be providing for the next few years. So upgrading is absolutely one of the key areas to build in based on the commodity richness of our region.
If I can say something else about that, because it has to do with skills. Because I think there is this conventional wisdom, to some extent, a stereotype, that there is one path. So you start producing food, then you move into producing clothes or textiles, and then you produce cars, and then you go into services. Maybe there's not one path. Maybe you jump from producing food to developing a biotechnology to be more productive in that area, more innovation, without really going through producing cars. It may happen. So it's not necessarily a continuum. So preparing, as you suggested, for the next step, it may be doing what we're doing now, but doing it better, and not necessarily thinking about changing the foundations of our economy.
If we're fast, we have time for a couple more questions, and I did see some over here, so if we could do that. Either one and then the other, maybe. If you could ask one question, you ask the other, and then we'll throw it back for the answers.
So my question is pretty quick. So regarding circular economy, and I think circular economy will change the way things are done. How ready are we, or how can we harness circular business models?
Martín Palazzo from Global Shapers, Buenos Aires. I'm a bit surprised. Perhaps you didn't mention, but it's on your priorities or not. But what about a really investment in science and technology? I mean, all the changes in all the world is happening about science and technology, and I'm a bit surprised that we are talking about commodities. And if we really want to survive in this connected world, do you think that science and technology should be one of the highest priorities or not?
Some quick answers over here.
I would say, I take a question about science and technology. Absolutely, absolutely, it's fundamental. The point is that doesn't necessarily contradict the idea that we are going to continue, or we could continue producing the commodities. On the contrary, we should be able to use part of the revenues from the commodities to invest in more science and technology. For example, in Colombia, we decided to put 10% of the royalties from oil and minerals into science and technology. So the two things are not at odds. We need to invest more in science and technology because that's what's going to lead us into what's the next step.
Final comments perhaps from the other three panelists, and then we'll close it out.
Well, to that point, yes, of course, we are talking about creating a culture of innovation. Innovation is related to science and technology. We need to change the culture of companies to take the risk to invest in those things and then change the business model and create more ecosystems of business where the network feedback your product, your service, and then the whole thing change. But for sure, you can think in a different business era without science and technology.
I would say, we are transforming so quickly as individuals in the technology we interact with, as corporations, as governments, and that's going to continue. That's not going anywhere. So from a digital transformation perspective, for it to be successful, we need to make sure we have the skills, as we've talked about, but also fairness and equity, and making sure that we're being able to thereby distribute the gain, the economic gain and social gain, more evenly, more fairly distributed.
Okay. I wanted our women partners to respond first, because I wanted to congratulate the World Economic Forum to have a majority of women, leader women in the panels, which is a policy that we are encouraging from the OECD. And it's important to learn, because I learn much more than I do when I speak. So going back to the question, science and technology and investment in commodities are totally compatible. I mean, the development of an agribusiness sector needs scientists around. If not, this is a no-go. Obviously, also science and technology elsewhere. And on the circular economy, unfortunately, I think our institutions are not ready yet. Labor institutions are really trying to catch up, how to regulate, should we regulate, how, in order not to have, with good intentions, end up with bad outcomes, that is, destroy some sectors. And also our competition institutions, unfortunately, are also lagging behind. So I think the digital agenda and regulating well this circular economy is something that is missing in this formula. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much to all of our esteemed panelists, and also to all of you for being here. I think I'm not going to spend too much time recapping. Clearly, the skills gap is one of the main issues, whether you're coming to that problem as a company or as a government or from any other direction. That is one of the main areas that needs to be addressed. We also discussed rule of law, taxation, infrastructure, a lot of obstacles that need to be overcome, and different ways that we're already beginning to overcome them. I think one of the things that's interesting that maybe we could take home is just how important the emotional skills are, that we're not just talking about learning a trade or becoming technologically more savvy. We're talking about being more human, and that's what we will need in the future, is to emphasize our human side. So thank you for being here.